It's fantastic to have you here and very much appreciate your time in joining us at DMU Women. Today, we're going to talk about menopause and confidence during the change. I've seen your work. Kirsty, I think you need no introduction, but just very briefly, very experienced and well-known broadcaster, particularly well-known, I think, for Newsnight, but also for your programme, The Menopause and Me, and the Insider's Guide to the Menopause. So I'm going to start off. My first question is really, what drove you to make those programs? What do you think we really need to talk about?
Well, I think nobody at that stage was talking really, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, nobody was really talking about the menopause at all. There'd never been a documentary in television. And a freelance producer who I know, May Miller, had been trying to bang the door to make a menopause program for the BBC, and they weren't interested. And so she came to me because she knew that I'd had an early menopause and then hysterectomy at 46, or vice versa. And said, look, would you be prepared to tell your story? Because I think if you're prepared to put your story as part of the program, the BBC might bite. And they did bite, and they bit very quickly. And so we set about making this show. And to be honest, I had absolutely no idea that it would have the reaction it had. And it had the most extraordinary reaction, probably the biggest reaction to anything I've ever done. And that reaction came from lots of different sources. So not long after, I was in a taxi, and the taxi driver thanked me and said that his wife had been feeling very poorly, and they'd watched the show together, and they had a kind of light bulb moment. I later saw in an article where a guy had written that his marriage is almost split up, and they watched the program, and it was only then they too had a light bulb moment. Other kind of reactions was I went into my GP surgery, and a couple of the GPs came out and said, oh my God, that's fantastic. We've had all these women coming in asking for Vagifem because, of course, it is a very discreet form of HRT. It doesn't go elsewhere in the body. And these were women with breast cancer or other cancers. So they were able to have it. And the other thing was that women were going to the GPs saying, we're not prepared to have antidepressants. We know that's no good. And the other thing was then that we had a number of different letters to me about different kinds of symptoms. And we realized that, we hadn't covered the waterfront. We just really started, and really other people have kind of taken up the baton since then. But the Menopause Cafes came out of that documentary, which was great. And I went to the Menopause Cafe in Perth. And it's just the idea that women felt free to talk, I think, for the first time.
Absolutely. And we certainly found that. We found the menopause cafes at DMU really popular. Not necessarily always to large groups of women, but we're getting women coming back again and again and wanting to explore different themes. And one of the themes was around confidence. Other themes have been exploring whether or not people should approach HRT, because of course there were scare stories as a result of the very famous study
in America. And they absolutely were scare stories, and they've been debunked. And now I think the kind of rule of thumb is, if you have breast cancer, then you have to check what kind of HRT. But HRT is not going to give you breast cancer. It just isn't. And the idea is to find a GP, and that's another network of women talking to each other about who's a GP who can actually talk about this stuff properly. Because, for so many years, GPs weren't given really proper training on this, because so many other things were crowding in on a massive curriculum, and already it had been this problem with the American study. But now, and the wonderful, wonderful work that Dr. Heather Curry does in menopause, and the Menopause Society, she has been really spreading the word. So GPs, I think, are much more aware now. And the other thing is that, there's no time to stop giving HRT. I mean, about 3 weeks ago, I got estrogel because I'm still having night sweats. It hasn't made much difference to me. It may be the wrong one, but my GP gave me it anyway. And a previous GP who'd since retired refused to give me anything when I was over 60, apart from Vagifem.
Yeah, I think this is the thing, and I've seen women who have been, and these are on programs and documentaries, just showing that they've been brought to tears by going again and again to the GP.
Absolutely.
And being put on antidepressants.
Shocking. It's absolutely shocking. and it's simply no good. Antidepressants are just no good for menopausal symptoms, and I think the debilitating things that are hard for women to deal with are, the night sweats, also the difficulties of sleep, things like that, joint pain, which I didn't know was a feature of being perimenopausal and menopausal. And the other thing to remember is that, this is not a choice. All women go through the menopause. There should be much better facilities. And the other thing that did happen after the program was a number of companies contacted me and said that they were having menopause meetings and menopause officers and a menopause policy. And BBC now has a menopause policy. A number of different organizations, Princess Trust has a menopause policy. A number of police forces have menopause policies. And I think every workplace should have a menopause policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to come on to ask you a question about that in a little while. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to move on to a bit of detail around the documentary, The Menopause and Me, and then in BBC Scotland, The Insider's Guide to the Menopause. In The Menopause and Me, you interviewed Jennifer Saunders, and I was really struck by that. For a start, I laugh so hard whenever I hear Jennifer Saunders.
She's brilliant. She's just one of the most brilliant comedy writers and performers. She's phenomenal.
She really is. And it struck me. She was talking to you and she said that she started to question and reflect on her place in the world. And she also said that she thought there was an indefinable something, in her words, that had been lost. And that made me reflect on my own feelings about menopause and some of the things that I've heard during the DMU Women Menopause Cafe. And there's something around confidence. In some moments, personally, I feel like I have increased levels of confidence because there's a certain amount of thinking, well, take it or leave it, this is me. And I think that comes with experience, age, and possibly the hormonal changes with the menopause. But it really struck me when Jennifer said there's an indefinable something that seems to have gone. And I wondered what your thoughts were when she said that to you, what that made you reflect on confidence.
Well, what was really good was that she said it. And I think that means that women feel free to talk about those feelings that they have. For me, actually, the menopause, I mean, it's been an ongoing thing, unfortunately, for many, many years, because actually the big thing for me was a hysterectomy at 46. And that really was a very big moment. So I think that, for me, in one way, which was great, was periods were over, and frankly, periods were never great for me. So not having them anymore was fine. I don't know, is it because of the more traditional view that, a woman's not a woman if she's not, bleeding every month? I don't know. Or when you're older, you feel less invisible. Frankly, that hasn't been the case for me. I haven't felt less confident. What is more problematic is not feeling on top of your game when you've not a lot of sleep, and that's trying to keep on top of the game. And I think one of the huge things for countering menopausal feelings is exercise. I really can't stress this enough. I think, and I don't mean like, running 5 meters every day, whatever, 5 kilometers. What I mean is just going out walking, doing stuff, being out in nature. It is a tremendous mood booster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've read books like Kate Humble's Thinking on My Feet, and I've just started her book, A Year of Living Simply. And I get outside myself and try and walk. In fact, I'm trying to train towards a challenge next year, a big walking challenge for a role I'm picking up actually with the Chartered Institute of Housing and some fundraising for end-use homelessness. And so the outdoors, the walking, it's not necessarily just the exercise per se, it's being outside, I think.
Yes, I think it is being outside. And actually, there's one thing this pandemic has shown us that, people who are lucky enough to have outside space, but being outside generally is good for us. Being outside when it's cold is good for us. Being outside when it's raining is good for us.
Yeah, they say there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing, don't they?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, and I think it is something that can help, particularly with confidence, and that's something that I think has come up recently in our women's cafe. So that's why the comment from Jennifer Saunders really struck a chord with me, and I was interested to know what you thought.
And I think what the great thing about the menopause cafes is that, as you say, women talk about all sorts of things there, and even it's just to share tips. I mean, that's one of the best things. It's sharing experiences, sharing tips, and things not to do, and behaviors not to take. Just don't take it when GPs are horrible to you, or people are dismissive of you because you've got hot flush. Don't take it.
Yeah, and it's having that. I guess it's a bit of a catch-22 because it's having that confidence. And the menopause cafes, as you say, through that connection can help by boosting women to say, no, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
I think it's astonishing that women's health is still seen as a niche area, a specialist area. We're only half the human population on the planet.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. If men went through the menopause, we'd know about it all the time. It would be a thing. And something marvelous would be done for menopausal men. It genuinely is yet another area of our lives where we're the begetters of the next generation, and yet our bodies take a battering from the age of 14 onwards. Our bodies take a battering, and and the conspiracy of silence over childbirth as well, because quite frankly, half the time it's hellish. But then you make sure you don't tell everybody it's hellish, because then people wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and it's that silent conspiracy that keeps the
and the silent conspiracy over the menopause, and that has got to be stopped.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think, as you say, with menopause, every woman is going to go through it. Not necessarily every woman will have children, but every woman will go through menopause.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we do need to break that open, I think. So yeah, that's fantastic, and I think we really connect in the cafe. And I think when we share this talk with colleagues at the Women's Cafe, it will really provoke some discussion. So
Good.
That's great. Just thinking about the programs that you made again, you must have spoken to so many women. So we've mentioned Jennifer Saunders, but you spoke to so many women as part of making those programs. In the Insider's Guide to the Menopause, we saw you and Kay Adams talking to a lot of women as part of a radio phone-in. I think there was one lady who phoned in her late 70s, and both you and Kay looked surprised that she was still getting hot flushes at night, debilitating hot flushes. And I thought that was interesting. So I wondered, really, what were the key issues and challenges that you heard in that phone-in and as part of the wider program making, and what and who inspired you during those programs?
Well, I mean, I think the one of the women around the kitchen table talked about this red mist that descends, this inexplicable rage, when she really has to be on her own, really has to go and walk off, and she finds it incredibly debilitating. And she wasn't keeping this secret, but her job is actually the chief nursing officer for Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the biggest hospital in Europe. And I thought that was tremendous, that she came on, and she was really inspirational. And I think, there was also a woman who was really deeply upset because she'd had antidepressants for years and had been fobbed off, and and had caused all sorts of problems. And women have relationship problems when they're feeling really menopausal and not themselves. And that's why it needs to be shared with partners, either male or female, that we're all sometimes feeling very vulnerable when we're menopausal. And so I thought the very fact that women opened up around the kitchen table and talked publicly about what had happened to them was in itself inspirational. I mean, because it hadn't been done before. None of these women had talked publicly about the menopause before. And here they were talking on television to a program that then was extended on iPlayer, was put on network, went on for ages. And really in themselves, they should be proud of themselves because they made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because it's almost as though we're reclaiming our bodies from the public debate, but we're having to do that by having a very public debate about women's bodies.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that women's bodies are not, they're not owned by ourselves. They're owned by the narrative in the media, the political narrative. We're seeing still awful crimes committed against women. We saw the recent murder of Sarah Everard.
Yeah.
And we've seen it again and again and again. And it seems that women don't own their own bodies when they're young. And then actually we seem to historically have been hidden when we're older,
I think historically we have been hidden when we're older because we're
Yeah.
kind of, useless, as it were. I think the expression, I can't remember, but we were talking actually in the program, and one thing with the historian I was talking about was the origins of what people thought were witches, because they were dried up, they were desiccated, they weren't used to anybody, they're a bit weird. And actually that was just a kind of othering of older women. And when you talk about an othering of older women, particularly in medieval times, you're talking about women over 35, because, life expectancy was so short, childbearing was well over by then. So, in history, I think women have been consigned. And so we have to really get that back, and we have to, but if I look at my daughter's generation now, she's 30, they're much better at that now. They're much better at owning that narrative, doing things their own way. And I really hope, thank God, because I was a feminist in 1972 when I was 17, and so many things have seemed to have gone backwards since then, which is really worrying. In terms of women's safety, it's not about, women shouldn't have to make themselves safe. Society should make it safe for women to do anything they want, to dress any way they want, to be who they are. Women shouldn't have to self-protect. It's about attitudes in society, and somehow those attitudes which are wrong are pervasive.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is the thing with menopause as well, is that we need to make those structural changes. It's not about women keeping quiet or suffering in silence. This is about society, organizations, companies, as you say, creating policies, guidances, making those structural changes.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to do that at all levels, for young women to make them feel safe, for women who are getting older, where there are changes due to the menopause, to make sure that they're happy and safe at work, that they can continue being productive in a workspace without having to suffer in silence. So I think you're right, it's taking it beyond the individual. And I think that's where our menopause cafe can help. So almost as sisters, we can speak to one another, we can share ideas. We're finding that there are younger women who are already thinking about perimenopause, who want to hear what some of the women who've already gone through it are saying. But equally, as you say, some of the young women today, they are savvy about equality, about their own experiences, and there's so much that we can learn from younger women. So it's a fantastic sharing space.
Yeah.
It's just starting to think about bringing the conversation to a conclusion, Kirsty. And we have been having discussion, highlighting some of the issues around the menopause. We've been doing this at De Montfort University. We've been working with Henpicked, develop a guidance, not yet a policy, but a guidance to start with, which will then lead on to a policy, hopefully. I'm just wondering, what do you think, what would be your suggestion to us at the university as to what we should do to, A, make sure we're menopause friendly, but B, particularly as thought leaders, as we are a university, what we can do to influence the public debate, the public decision making around menopause. I just wondered what your thoughts might be around that.
Well, I think, first of all, take the university itself. Now, in one way, in every way, of course, it's fantastic. You've got the Menopause Cafe, but actually, what's great about that is women are talking to other women, but you are actually talking to other women. Yeah. And I think my suggestion would be that as a university, you do something a wee bit different. So you can make it anonymous, but you take members of faculty, members of your administrative departments, members of all different areas of the university, be it catering, cleaning, whatever. And you get everybody that wants to take part to write something, 100 words, anonymously, because it probably would be. And actually you put that in a pamphlet and say, this is about menopause at De Montfort. We are now planning a new policy. These are the stories of people you work with daily who are either perimenopausal, menopausal, or past menopause. And just gather them together and either put them online or actually put them up. Maybe one day you could have these around the university. And so you would involve everybody at the university in designing a menopause policy, no matter what they do. I think probably it should be anonymous just because it makes it easier.
I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think the guidance will help colleagues for a start, but to develop a menopause policy, we are very consultative. We certainly try to be at the university. And I think that actually proper consultation is about a really strong listening exercise at the start. And so the idea of storytelling, it appeals to me. That's my kind of research. So the idea of getting people to co-produce their own menopause story and to share that as a start point, that's certainly something we'll be raising at our next online menopause cafe.
Because then it publicizes it immediately. You know, it doesn't cost you anything except to put up or to get a platform to put the stuff on it. I don't think it necessarily should be online. I think even around cafes, just notes left. I mean, I know maybe that's not very environmentally sound, but so that people are just being like, oh, what's this? And this is the story of X who came to work and, you know, someone, you know, was very dismissive of her because she was flushing or something. All these, everybody's got a different story. So we just gather lots of stories from women on campus.
And I think making it more visible as well. I mean, I've read things like organisations purchasing fans, for example, as almost as visual props around the place. But actually something really powerful, like having a quote from a personal anonymised story and making people stop and really rethink. I think that's great advice. Thank you so much, Kirsty.
No.
I really appreciate you joining us. I loved the programmes. I continue to watch the clips. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, have a wonderful cafe. Have a wonderful cafe. Lovely to meet you, Jo.
Yeah,
Bye.
and Kirsty, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.